stuff. I mean, I see the book's doing very well. Let's start off talking about that.
Oh man. Yeah, the book, speaking of kids, second to having kids is the biggest accomplishment of my life. And I think when I started writing, I really did not know where I was going. I just knew that I had to write. And
Mm.
the thing that catalyzed that, because I think so many of us have a desire to write a book before we die. I think every one of us has a story to tell. And the question really is what's going to be the impetus to actually put pen to paper, because it's such a big goal. And in my case, I got a call on March 13th of 2022 that my sister had died of a drug overdose. I really, with the exception of collapsing in the Austin, Texas airport and heaving uncontrollably, remember nothing about that day. But my husband has told me since then that on the plane ride, I said to him, I'm fucking writing a book.
Yeah.
So somehow I knew that that was the tipping point of all the really big, difficult stories of my life, and that I needed to discharge the power that they had by putting them outside of me. So it really began as a memoir. And as I got clearer on what it is I was trying to do with the book, because I think the power of storytelling is deeply missing in general.
Yeah.
I think we grew up with that. I think our ancestors, once upon a time, we didn't have podcasting and screens and phones, and we connected through storytelling in real time. And so the book has so much of my story woven throughout it. And at the same time, my story is so uniquely my own. And it would still be easy for people to other themselves and say, well, gosh, I haven't had a sibling die. I'm not a recovering cocaine addict. How does this apply to me? And since I realized I wanted to help as many people as possible, I thought, well, what helped me? And what was ultimately the thing that helped me? And that answer was really clear, which was 5 years into my recovery, I was, on the one hand, physically abstinent, and on the other hand, spiritually dead inside. And I am one of the lucky ones that didn't relapse and die in that 5 year period, living miserably and truly believing there was no other way I could live other than my hardwiring toward perfectionism, other than feeling safe and whole and loved in the world by everything outside of me going exactly according to plan. I did not see another way forward, even though the steps had been pressed upon me many different times by many different people. The language of them, I didn't know this at the time, but it was butting up against deeply ingrained childhood beliefs about God, about men, about willpower that I couldn't just dismantle just because I had a cocaine problem. So I ignored them and I tried to get my drinking and using under control. Eventually was able to completely abstain, but I was miserable. And this woman came into my life at the right time when, I believe the science of change is a real bitch. And it doesn't matter what kind of change we're talking about. We could talk about physical change in the body. You want to lose weight, or you have knee pain and you really want to learn how to move differently to not have knee pain anymore, or emotional pain, whichever kind of pain. You know, I believe I've seen this in my clinic. I've seen this in and out of the rooms of recovery with normies, quote unquote, which is the average person. We are operating in patterns that are part of our hardwiring, our genetic makeup, that are part of what we saw when we grew up, that are partly conditioned by our culture. And they work for a while. Sometimes they work, some of them forever, for the entirety of our lives. But often life will throw us a situation that's so unusual that we've never faced before. Often matters of the heart, like a big betrayal or a loss of a loved one. And it comes right up against the way we've been living. And all of a sudden, we're feeling pain living the way we've been living. And the pain is telling us something. And if it is loud enough, if it is pronounced enough, in my case, my soul level desperation during a marital crisis at 5 years sober, the pain of living, trying to control my marriage was so great that I hit spiritual rock bottom. And so the pain wakes us up, and there's this tiny window where we have willingness. I can't fucking live this way. I can't live in this body that I'm putting poison into. I can't stay at this job that I know isn't my destiny, right? We wake up, we have a small window, but then what? What are we going to do to change the trajectory of our life? And on a science level, if we don't begin a practice of new behavior rigorously, consistently, a little bit every day, that we feel safe, which is so important, practicing, that resonates with us based on our lived experience, we will always fall back to the old pattern. It's how we were wired. It's our circuitry. Those patterns, those reward systems. Oh, when I get an A, I get patted on the back. When I get that check at the job I don't like, feels good to put that money in my bank account. So whatever, doesn't matter that I'm not that happy. The reward systems keep coming in, and we're going to keep doing that thing. And we might get to the end of our life and go, the fuck have I done with my whole life? So my book and what happened to me in that place of desperation is the template for what to do step by step when you are finally in that tiny window of willingness and opportunity where you can make a change. And when this woman walked into my life, she said, not that it's impossible because we're addicts, and sometimes what addicts do is relapse. But I wonder if instead of talking about alcohol and cocaine, we did the steps on your marriage. I wonder if we made them apply to the situation that's hurting you, if it might help you find your way forward. Sounded like a really good idea, because anything before that was very God heavy. Or I was able, with my first sponsor, who I loved dearly, who was a friend before he was a sponsor, I was able to just borrow his faith because he seemed like he had figured something out that I hadn't. And he was 22 years sober from heroin addiction. He was alive against all odds. So I believed him, even though I didn't believe in God. And then at the end of my first year sober, he relapsed and he killed himself. So any shot at faith was gone again. So from that 1 year after his suicide to this marital crisis, I just ran on self-will. Not because I was an egomaniac, like what they say in recovery, because I felt like I had to. Because when I was little, my mom said, the only person you can count on is yourself. And I had evidence all around me of how the world had done her dirty. Can't count on anyone but yourself, kid. It's tough out there. So when this woman said, we should do the steps on your marriage, okay. We're not talking about God. We're not talking about a patriarchy. What does she mean by that? Well, If step one is I am powerless over, name the substance, alcohol, drugs, sex, Instagram, wanting likes,
Mm.
I'm powerless over my marriage. I'm powerless over begging and pleading for my husband to love me again after the way I had behaved in my addiction toward him. I'm powerless over him rejecting me sexually and me feeling worthless. I'm powerless over the future of the marriage that I so desperately want to control, and over all of my hopes and dreams about what I thought this time in my life was going to look like, because it doesn't. And when I try to exert power over it, over him, over changing his mind, my life becomes unmanageable in the following ways. I am completely other focused. My peace is only contingent on what he is saying or doing. Otherwise, I'm not okay. It's unmanageable because I'm in a constant state of anxiety and obsession about what I'm going to say and do today to make him see that I'm worth forgiving. It's unmanageable because I have absolutely no self-respect. And all of a sudden, that made a lot of sense to me, right? Because I could see that I was expending tremendous amounts of energy circling the drain, feeling terrible, and it not getting me where I wanted it to. So we went through each of the 12 steps, the traditional steps of recovery rooms that I had done before, never fully, right? Because there was never really a faith or a God. And even as we crossed through different steps that said the word God, she didn't push it down my throat. She said, just, it could be the sky, it could be energy, it could be this friendship, that just, she really backed off because she also knew that if she pushed it, it wouldn't work. Everyone else had tried to do that and it didn't work. And we got to the 9th step, which is making an amends. And I was at this time 30 years old and had been in recovery for 5 years, had been in therapy, not good therapy. I've since been in really good therapy, but up until that moment, not very good therapy. And she was the first person in my life who said, have you ever made an amends to yourself? And if I had to pick the one thing that changed my life forever, because there's a lot of pieces to my story, I would have to say it was that moment and that question, because I am a hardwired perfectionist. That became so clear to me in recovery when I didn't have new healthy coping patterns and I was relying solely on my desire and ability to control the world. The inner critic was running my life, and living with her as the CEO inside of me was hell on earth because nothing was ever enough. It may not have ever occurred to me in my whole life that I could forgive myself for the things I had done in my addiction that I wasn't proud of. It might have never occurred to me. And I might have always been living with shame, which I believe, because I have seen it again and again, kill the people that I love, not just on a soul level, but physically. I believe shame is the thing that, when left untreated, killed my sister. And this process of making an amends to myself lifted the shame. It is a process to Learn to be more compassionate with yourself, especially if you're really good at self-ridicule. It is not like I waved a wand in front of a mirror and was like, "You are forgiven." And all of a sudden I had this really healthy self-talk, right? I mean, we're talking it is an ongoing process, and I'm 10 years on the other side of it. Although I will happily say, you want to talk about rewiring the brain body connection. The person who sits in the seat of CEO in my life today, inside of me, because we all have lots of parts of who we are, is my truest, most loving, most compassionate part of who I am. It's not that the perfectionist isn't there. She's there. She's in the boardroom. She wants to chime in. Ooh, could have done that better. Thank you for sharing. We did the best we could, and we're going to try our best next time as well. Love you. See you tomorrow. This process of forgiving myself slowly, what it did was it allowed me to see the situation I was in, right? This marital crisis, for what it was. Because when we are ashamed of who we are, we are only seeing it through the lens of, well, I guess the punishment fits the crime. I guess I deserve these breadcrumbs for what I did and for who I am. And we never move out of that space. It's like a noose around our neck. So once the shame started to lift, I went, wow, I'm desperately trying to get this relationship to be what it was in the past, before a lot of the lying and the cheating, when it was sweet and new and fun, or what I want it to be in the future when he finally forgives me for what a piece of shit I am. All of that went away, and I could see it for what it was, which is, this man made a choice to stay with me no matter what I did. And now I'm sober, and I've been sober for several years, making a living amends, living an honest life. And he still got engaged to me, and he still got married. And I don't deserve this. I don't deserve breadcrumbs, because shame has us believe that we are a bad person. Guilt, man, I wish I could have done that differently. I'm going to do it differently moving forward. Has us believe that we made a bad choice, but that we're not a bad person. So we have agency over making new choices in the future. And we don't hold ourselves hostage for being treated like shit. Nothing has been more healing to my soul journey than a practical application of the 12 steps. The other incredible thing in that time that started to happen, because, remember, my relationship with God there was none. I had no desire, right? But in that quiet time, after couch surfing on many friends' couches, finally signing a lease, in this separation from my husband, working with this woman, I started to hear a different voice inside of me that wasn't the critic. And it seemed like when she showed up, it was rising up from my belly. It was very strange. And that's still true to this day, by the way. I can't really explain it, except that when I'm in my perfectionism brain, it's very cerebral. I'm really trying to figure it out. Ooh, if I could just figure it out, everything will be fine. And I'm very obsessive, and I'm ruminating, and it's like a buzzing anxiety.
Yeah.
When the other voice started to show up, it was everything that starts with the letter C. It was calm. It was clear. It was compassionate, and it was curious. It always made me feel expansive. I never thought of that. I'm going to think about that. That seems like a good idea for my next career move. I'm going to try that. And all of a sudden, as I listened to this new part of me and I took action in that direction, some nudge, right? Like when we get a gut feeling about something, oh, I should call that person. I should hold the door for that person. I should not get on the freeway today. Right? When we take the action in that direction of that voice, that calm, clarifying voice, we start to get some wins. Some good stuff started to happen for me. And I thought, well, shit, I don't know if there's a God the way I imagine it in my head. The guy up in the sky with the white beard who's like, you deserve this and you shall die. That's the idea I had of God, if there was one, or there was no such thing. So if faith was this thing I might need to cultivate in really hard times with matters of the heart, like a marital crisis where control yields me nothing but insanity, maybe this voice is a power greater than this, a power greater than my perfect voice. Maybe the whisper of my intuition could become the God of my own understanding. And so began my relationship with what I now call God. I have been nurturing that relationship for the last 10 years. I can almost always tell when I'm operating from my cerebral mind versus my gut. It feels physiologically very different. When I'm obsessive and ruminating and everything feels like it shrinks and it feels really hard versus when I'm not. And the one really cool thing about time in recovery, time with emotional sobriety, is that the threshold for being in that icky, obsessive place, which I fall back on all the time, right? Something new happens in my life. I feel afraid. My default is to control everything. Typically at this point, people, places, things, and situations, right? That's the default. But because I've been practicing this stuff for a long time, I know exactly how that feels. And I know there's really no access to peace or power in that place. And I can quickly shift and pull on any one of the 12 steps in a really practical way to try and get back to my intuitive voice and be guided by what she might have me say or do. I used to spend a long time early on in recovery in the pain part of everything. That's just what I was good at. And thank God my tolerance for feeling that way is so, so, so low now, because I know I deserve to feel good. And I didn't get sober to feel like shit. But my God, it took a lot to get here. And so my book is honestly an attempt not just at reimagining the steps for the addict who hates them, who really can't get behind the language when so many things have changed. It's 2024, but the language of those steps hasn't. I understand the pushback. I get it. My book, though, is for everyone. My book is for that place where the window of opportunity for real change is in front of you, and you have no idea how to find your way forward. This is literally a step-by-step process. You could use it when you're stuck in traffic. If you're a person who loves to be early, you planned it all out, you're going to get to the job interview with 15 minutes to sit and relax. And then there's a traffic jam. And you're in a fit of rage because you're going to be late. Step one will work for you too. You are powerless over the goddamn traffic.
Right.
Much as you wish you weren't. And when you try to exert power over it, you fly into a rage. Your nervous system goes into a tailspin. You got stress hormones flooding your body. What do you have actual power over in that moment? Well, not much. You could call, though, calmly and say, I'm so sorry. This is what just happened. I can continue to update you. I'm going to do my best to be there as quickly as I can. And then you take a deep breath and you calm down, right? My book is an attempt to make the 12 steps available and applicable to anybody, whether they're an addict or not, so that whatever life circumstance comes their way, big or small, they have a pathway through the pain. And the reality is, even though we don't like to think about this, is, for me anyway, grief has been one of the hardest things. Taken me to my knees. I lost Bobby. I lost my dad 5 years ago. I lost my sister 2 years ago. And lots of other smaller losses along the way that I'm not even going to touch right now because it's all in my book. Grief does not discriminate. Every one of us is going to lose somebody we love, if we haven't already. And what are we going to do when that happens? We're going to have some choices, right? In the wake of my sister's death, I had some choices. I could relapse and basically die because I knew from Bobby's death that if I touched substances again, I was done. I could do what I did when my dad died, which is try to numb out and run from the grief because it felt impossible to handle. And in those couple years after my dad died, I tried to control food and body. And boy, I did a good job. Got real skinny. Had 2 babies. Everyone thought I was a magician for how fit I looked. But I was punishing myself because I had regret over where our relationship was before he died. I was not well. I was obsessed with what I put in my body and how much I worked out at the gym. I didn't heal for 2 years. I just ran. So when my sister died, I knew I had that option. I also knew that it doesn't work.
Right.
Right? And the only way out is through. So I could go ahead and starve myself again for 2 years, or worse, run off and have an extramarital affair to try to feel alive again because I felt so dead inside. I could have made any number of behavioral choices, not feel my feelings. Or option 3, I could fully live. I could lean all the way into the pain. I could seek out joy, like the air that I breathe, because we don't really know when grief is showing up. And once you've had a loss, it's so unpredictable. You could be fine for a few days, and then all of a sudden something happens. You get triggered, you remember something, and you are gutted. So in the meantime, I'm going to go get what's mine. I'm going to play. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to cry when I need to cry. I'm going to write. I'm going to get these stories outside of me. And I'm going to try and help somebody else. Here I am talking to you, helping someone else.